This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
I am so excited for this spa day. Candles lit, music on, hot tub warm and ready. And then my chronic hives come back. Again, in the middle of my spa day. What a wet blanket. Looks like another spell of itchy red skin. If you have chronic spontaneous urticaria, or CSU, there is a different treatment option. Hives during my next spa day? Not if I can help it. Learn more at treatmyhives.com.
Atheists, agnostics, long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government.
Welcome to The Politics Guys, a place for bipartisan, rational, and civil debate on American politics and policy. I'm Northern Kentucky University political scientist Michael Baranowski. I'm joined today by University of Northern Iowa political scientist Justin Holmes, as well as, once again, a new conservative voice on the show, attorney Sam Dewey. Justin and Sam, welcome back.
Good morning.
Good to be here.
So, as I said, there was a bunch of stuff we didn't get to, and I am actually going to do something a lot of folks probably are desperate for me to do, is I'm going to shut up and let Justin start us off here this week. Go ahead, Justin.
All right. So one of our stories that's come up this week is kind of the ongoing Trump, Ukraine, and Russia situation, which, gosh, we've been talking about as long as I've been doing the podcast. I just saw this has been going on for 4 years now, not Trump, but Ukraine and Russia, and seems to be sort of at a stalemate. But this week there was a bit of a shift in Trump's tone as far as Ukraine goes. A couple weeks ago, Trump had a 2-hour phone call with Putin, which he described as very productive. Didn't really say much about the contents. But then in the time after, Russia has basically upped its bombings in Kiev and other Ukrainian cities. About all that we've gotten so far out of this, sort of is talks of maybe there will be a memo about having talks, down the road. But one of the sort of notable things this week is that Trump actually seemed to turn some of his ire a little bit at Putin, which he has not in the past, describing Putin as crazy and playing with fire. So we don't have a nickname yet, as Trump is often wont to do. But this does seem to be a bit of a shift in terms of tone, where, in the past he's been critical of Zelensky. Here he is being critical of Putin, perhaps, indicating that he's reached kind of a level of frustration with this problem that he was originally going to settle more or less on day one. So thoughts about this? Does this look like a shift in tone? Is there a meaningful shift beyond a shift in tone? Is this something where we're going to see some sort of new policy come out of this? Is this going to be something that we'll be talking about 4 years from now because it's basically still at a stalemate? Turn it over to whoever.
Sam, why don't you start, because the people have heard me talk about this for quite a while, and yours is a new voice on this.
I think it's a very complex situation to unravel, because you have a nuclear power that is pot committed and a leader who is unpredictable in Vladimir Putin. I actually don't think he's insane, like some people said. I think he's, insane, crazy like a fox.
Yeah, huh?
I don't think he's clear. I mean, he may have other clinical issues, but I don't think he's crazy. He's crazy like a fox, but he's pot committed and he's got thousands of nuclear warheads. And that's the real problem here, is that, to my mind, if you didn't stop this at the beginning, and I strongly fault the Biden administration for not doing so, and I actually agree that this would not have happened if Trump had been in office, because instead of ineffective sanctions, the economic reprisals would have been more than Putin was willing to factor in. and I expect that what would have happened is okay, you can do this, but we're declaring the ruble non-convertible, and all the central banks are going to short the ruble, and you're going to be Weimar Republic, and that's your choice if you want to invade. That was the general understanding of the deterrent posture. We know that works. Nixon did it to de Gaulle, and de Gaulle backed down in about 4 hours when de Gaulle was messing around with European alliances. But put that to one side, water under the bridge. The problem is you can't tank the ruble now because he's so pot committed. Putin is so pot committed that you have to find a way off of this, because Putin is crazy like a fox, and I don't think he's going to get into a direct exchange, but I also don't think he would have a problem releasing a tactical weapon, calculating that we're not going to retaliate if he nukes someone who's not an Article 5 NATO ally. So that's, I think, the dance that is going on here, is that because he's crazy like a fox, because he has these weapons, because of the natural hesitancy to respond, there is a real question of how does this play out? And we have to find a way out. And I think that's going to be extraordinarily difficult because Zelensky doesn't seem to realize the position he's in, where Putin's pot committed. We're not going to get into a war with a nuclear power to walk Putin all the way back. And because he has effectively the nuclear card to blackmail, it's not really blackmail, it's more gray mail, because it's international politics. I shouldn't have put it that way. I think this is going to take a while to land the plane because both parties are not coming to the table. I generally think Zelensky needs to shut up and accept that he was ill-served when this all started, and that because Putin is, depending on the estimates, God, what is 600,000 pot committed? God knows how much money, that Zelensky's just going to have to give up some of his territory. And that's just the way it works when you've got gray mail from a nuclear power and you didn't stop them before they became pot committed. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I just don't see any other way around it. And I think that's the very practical, realpolitik approach that Trump is taking, where he's working and pressuring both sides. The old aphorism is, withdrawal or we will all surely die here. And I think he's kind of starting from that premise and working backwards and finding something where everybody can save face, but back down from the fact that you've got a pot committed nuclear power.
I certainly appreciate that. And I do have a certain amount of sympathy because it feels like he's stuck between considering sanctions and threatening them. And certainly he said, well, we'll see in 2 weeks. This is the third or fourth time he said that. And he understands that, well, if he pushes too hard, he might lose some leverage in making a deal. I don't really think there's much leverage in the first place, actually. But I guess I feel like he seems almost oddly reluctant to employ the art of the deal when it comes to Russia as opposed to anyone else. And maybe it is for the nuclear reason, because the only thing more dangerous than a sociopath is maybe a sociopath with the largest nuclear arsenal in the world. That's pretty bad, right? And I feel comfortable in calling Vladimir Putin a sociopath. But then I look at something like, I feel a little more, I'm going to say something positive about Lindsey Graham, which I almost never do. I used to back in the days when he was John McCain's running mate, but then he went crazy. Anyway, but he introduced something called the Sanctioning Russia Act of 2025. And right now, it is a very popular bill in the Senate. It has 80 co-sponsors, right? So that means, do the math. Senate math is always easy. 80% of the Senate backs this thing. There's a companion House bill with 33 co-sponsors, equally split between Democrats and Republicans. Same in the Senate bill. What it would do was impose additional sanctions on Russia if Russia doesn't, in good faith, try to negotiate a peace agreement, if it violates any agreement, or if it initiates another invasion of Ukraine. And to me, this is the sort of thing that I would like to see Congress advance on a bipartisan sort of level. It seems like that's happening in committee, but my sense is that this isn't probably going to get any further. And I really think that's too bad, because I want to see Congress step up here and do something. I don't expect it to happen, but I'm curious what you guys think. Justin, any thoughts?
Well, at this point, I'd like to see Congress do anything.
Seconded.
proof of life, anything. Yeah, I feel like we've just been kind of floundering here, and it's a really hard situation. Sam, I think you're absolutely right that, this nuclear angle, frankly, it's one that's not been talked about maybe as much as it should, because, this is a nuclear power, and I don't know Putin. I don't know whether he's a sociopath or crazy like Fox or, just simply a rational actor. But that is the kind of stuff you don't want to monkey with, to use technical international relations language. At the same time, I think it's very hard for Zelensky, whether or not he needs to kind of adjust his bargaining strategy, et cetera. It's very hard to concede territory, and both politically and kind of from an emotional and ethical standpoint. I think the other thing with Zelensky is just that he's largely sort of fought Russia to a stalemate at this point, and so they're getting bombed, but they're giving back, as well. And, I'm not sure that he feels a kind of pressure to give up territory yet. They're not being routed. They're not being really, they're kind of in a stalemate here, which feels like in a lot of ways probably the most difficult sort of scenario to negotiate, because I don't know that anybody has sort of any particular incentive at the moment to concede. And I kind of agree with Mike that I think kind of more sanctions, more isolation, et cetera, of Russia, I think bringing more of that into the mix might actually put a little pressure on him. But, he's largely, he doesn't seem any more interested in negotiating than Zelensky does. There was a meeting, I don't know, about a month ago now, and the Ukrainians were expecting kind of a high level delegation, and it was just sort of a bunch of low level staffers and such, and Putin just keeps saying, we'll do this eventually, or whatever, and keeps sort of not. I mean, we can't even get to a memo to have a meeting right now. And I think without some sort of external pressure, we're just going to see this go on more or less indefinitely, because nobody's really racking up a decisive win on either side. I guess, the concern is what happens when, Putin probably does have, more kind of in his back pocket. So perhaps, avoiding that scenario where he nukes Kiev or something like that is good. But it seems like we could be doing more to sort of put some pressure on the situation to move it towards an end.
I want to say on the stalemate issue, I think while things have slowed down a lot, you can sort of see over time, once we've gotten into this phase, that Russia is slowly making kind of incremental gains. And of course, as you kind of alluded to, the sort of balance of resources dramatically favors Russia in the long term there. And so I think what Vladimir Putin is doing here is very rational, just kind of stalling as long as he can possibly stall, and hoping, and I think it's making a bet that Donald Trump will just do what any normal deal maker does, is that you walk away from a deal that doesn't seem like a good one and focus on something else. And I think for all of his kind of blowhardish rhetoric about I can do this in a day, I can do this even before I'm elected, now he's saying, like, there are a lot of murmurings from administration folks, at least who are leaking to the media, saying, listen, if something doesn't happen here pretty soon, maybe we'll just walk away from these talks and let them figure it out themselves. So, Sam, thoughts on that? We hope you enjoyed this preview of our supporters exclusive midweek show. If you'd like to hear the rest of the episode, we hope you'll consider becoming a supporter. Supporters get ad-free access to all of our shows, membership in our Politics Guys Discord group where you can join in on the conversation, and other benefits at different levels of support. To become a supporter, go to patreon.com/politicsguys. You can also support us through Venmo or @politicsguys, or through PayPal. You'll find all of our support links in the show notes, as well as at politicsguys.com/support. And if you'd like to get the midweek show, but you're not in a position to become a financial supporter, that's not a problem. Just send me an email at mike@politicsguys.com, and I'll be happy to get that set up for you.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group,